Imagine this, a man, known by everyone around him as someone always available, always present, the safe harbor in the emotional storms of others. He never said no, was always there for everyone all the time. But one day, without warning, he disappears. No phone calls, no messages, no trace. People began to notice his absence, to ask about him. Initially, it seemed like no one really cared that much. After all, he had always been there, always came back, right? But as the days passed, so did a deafening silence that took over their conversations. The man who had always offered support, who had always been within reach, was now just a shadow in their memories. A discomfort started to creep in, something that hadn't existed before. Now, everyone wondered, what happened to him? Why did he disappear? Was it for good? What they didn't realize was that, for this man, the choice to disappear wasn't impulsive, but an act of silent strength. He had realized that his constant availability had lost its value. His departure marked the beginning of a personal transformation. But for the others, it was the start of a void they didn't know how to fill. Now ask yourself, how would the people in your life react if suddenly you stopped being so available? What would happen if you disappeared? Let's explore the power of withdrawing when they least expect it, and how this simple act can change everything. 1. The importance of completely disappearing. Have you ever stopped to think about the impact your disappearance could have on the lives of those who underestimate you? Stoicism teaches us to value self-control, and that includes knowing when it's time to step away. When we disappear from someone's life, we're not just leaving physically. We are removing our presence, our energy, and our attention. And often it's in that vacuum that people finally realize what they've lost. But why does this happen? When we make ourselves always available, we become predictable. Constant presence turns into something others expect effortlessly, without real appreciation. Stoicism reminds us that being predictable does not benefit us. On the contrary, it weakens our position. When we disappear, predictability dissolves, and with it, the other person's comfort zone. This opens the loop. What do they feel when you disappear? The answer might surprise you. The forced absence creates a mental space that was once filled by you. Your physical absence becomes a stronger emotional presence. What was once routine now becomes a mystery. This, according to Stoic principles, is the power of not reacting, stepping away and letting people feel the impact of your absence. As the void begins to weigh on them, they try to fill the space left behind. But can they? Stoicism teaches us that true power lies within us, not in others. We don't need them to immediately see our worth. In fact, the value we demonstrate is in our ability to disappear, to distance ourselves, and become an out-of-reach figure. This disappearance, contrary to what many think, is not a sign of weakness, but of strength. Now, the curiosity gap emerges. What happens after you disappear? The time you spend off the radar creates attention for the other person. They begin to realize that you weren't just a figure in their life, you were an influence. And the longer you stay distant, the stronger this realization becomes. 2. Power and control. When you vanish from someone's life, something interesting happens. The person who once seemed to have all the control over the relationship now feels that control slipping away. Stoicism teaches us that control always resides within us. But in the absence of our presence, those who depended on us emotionally or mentally find themselves stranded. This isn't about manipulation, but about the value you offer, which becomes evident when you disappear. At first, it may seem like those who underestimated you are indifferent, but the reality is that your absence begins to create discomfort. The control they believed they had unravels, and doubts start to arise. Will you come back? Do they still have any power over you? Deep down, Stoicism reminds us that they never truly had control. The power was always in how you controlled your own reactions and decisions. Here, curiosity builds. How do they feel when they realize they've lost control? Disappearance forces the other person to confront their own insecurities. The ego, once inflated by your availability, begins to crumble. They come to understand that the control they thought they had was an illusion. The person who disappears becomes an enigma, a presence that, paradoxically, is stronger in absence. You, on the other hand, remain steadfast on your path. Stoicism teaches that external control is irrelevant. The important thing is internal control. By disappearing, you take ultimate control over yourself. They may try to regain control, but they can't. The gap of power destabilizes them, leaving them insecure and full of doubts. And now, can they regain the control they thought they had? Number. Because the Stoic knows that true power is unshakable. It's not in the hands of others. It's in the one who knows how to withdraw at the right moment. In the one who understands that external control does not define their worth. 3. The value of presence and the power of silence. Silence. It seems simple, but silence has a power that few fully understand. The moment you disappear and stop communicating, your absence speaks volumes. Stoicism values the power of restraint, and nothing demonstrates your strength more effectively than silence. When you're always present, people tend to take that for granted. But when you stop showing up, stop sending messages, stop making efforts, your value begins to be calculated. Silence creates room for reflection. Those who once ignored you begin to realize what they lost. How do they feel when you disappear? Stoicism suggests that absence teaches a much more powerful lesson than any words ever could. When you stop being present, the other person has to deal with the void you left behind, and that emptiness is heavy. Have you ever noticed how silence can be more deafening than any argument? Stoicism reminds us that actions, or the lack of them, speak louder than words. Absence creates expectation. Will you return? Is everything they took for granted now lost forever? This mystery begins to gnaw at the other person, forcing them to confront the power of your silence. If you've ever caught yourself thinking about how powerful silence can be, take this moment to like the video. It helps the channel grow and spreads this message to more people. And if you know someone who needs to understand this power, share this content. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to keep receiving more reflections like this. Curiosity heightens. Can they handle the emptiness you left behind? Silence forces introspection. Those who grew accustomed to your presence now have to face the fact that you're no longer available. The weight of that silence is far greater than any words could be. Each day they don't hear from you is a constant reminder of the value you brought. So, what's next? In Stoicism, silence is a powerful choice. It teaches patience and the value of waiting for the right moment to speak or not speak. You maintain your silence because you know it is the deepest form of communication. 2. Power and control. When you vanish from someone's life, something interesting happens. The person who once seemed to have all the control over the relationship now feels that control slipping away. Stoicism teaches us that control always resides within us. But in the absence of our presence, those who depended on us emotionally or mentally find themselves stranded. This isn't about manipulation, but about the value you offer, which becomes evident when you disappear. At first, it may seem like those who underestimated you are indifferent, but the reality is that your absence begins to create discomfort. The control they believed they had unravels, and doubts start to arise. Will you come back? Do they still have any power over you? Deep down, Stoicism reminds us that they never truly had control. The power was always in how you controlled your own reactions and decisions. Here, curiosity builds. How do they feel when they realize they've lost control? Disappearance forces the other person to confront their own insecurities. The ego, once inflated by your availability, begins to crumble. They come to understand that the control they thought they had was an illusion. The person who disappears becomes an enigma, a presence that, paradoxically, is stronger in absence. You, on the other hand, remain steadfast on your path. Stoicism teaches that external control is irrelevant. The important thing is internal control. By disappearing, you take ultimate control over yourself. They may try to regain control, but they can't. The gap of power destabilizes them, leaving them insecure and full of doubts. And now, can they regain the control they thought they had? Number. Because the Stoic knows that true power is unshakable. It's not in the hands of others. It's in the one who knows how to withdraw at the right moment. In the one who understands that external control does not define their worth. 5. The fear of permanent loss. Finally, the fear of loss. This is the feeling that strikes at the heart of those left behind. Stoicism teaches us to accept the inevitable. But for those unfamiliar with this philosophy, the fear of loss is paralyzing. When you disappear, what once seemed guaranteed is now uncertain. The fear that you'll never return begins to take over. This fear grows stronger with time. The longer you're distant, the more powerful it becomes. Your absence isn't just physical, it's emotional and mental. The one left behind starts to wonder if you've moved on, if you've found something or someone better. And this uncertainty creates a quiet desperation. Stoicism teaches that acceptance is the key to overcoming fear. But few know how to handle it. What will they do when the fear becomes unbearable? Will they try to win you back? Fear of loss is one of the greatest motivators for action. But in Stoicism, we know we shouldn't act out of fear. The person left behind is now in a difficult position. They want to have you back, but do they deserve a second chance? Here's the final opening. Fear of loss can be a catalyst for change. But you, as a Stoic, already know that you are no longer at the mercy of this cycle. What happens next is in your hands. They may try, but the final decision will always be yours. 6. The desire to regain control. When regret and fear of loss settle in, something interesting happens. A desperate desire to regain control is born. Those who were once comfortable with your absence now feel the need to recover what was lost. And here's the big question. How do they try to do it? Stoicism teaches us not to act on impulse. However, those unfamiliar with this philosophy often react emotionally, seeking quick fixes to cover up their own mistakes. At this point, many resort to predictable tactics. They might try to call you back, using words that sound hollow or actions that, deep down, reveal the desperation behind them. In Stoicism, we understand that this quest for control is an illusion. True strength lies in recognizing that we don't have control over others, only over our own reactions. The person left behind hasn't realized this yet, and thus tries to pull you back into the old dynamic. But will you return? The curiosity gap is powerful. Have they truly learned anything, or are they simply reacting to the fear of the void your absence created? Stoicism teaches us not to fall into emotional traps. We shouldn't be swayed by others' desires to regain control over us. After all, those who act only to alleviate their own pain are stuck in the cycle of ego, not in true change. The longer you stay firm, the stronger you become. They try everything to regain control, but the more you remain distant, the more power slips away from them. Stoicism reminds us that the control they seek to reclaim was never theirs. It belongs to you. And the real question is, will you give them a second chance? So what will they do now? Will they give in to the frustration of not being able to reach you? Or will they keep fighting to regain the control they thought they had? This dilemma, deep down, reveals the weakness of trying to control others instead of controlling themselves. 7. The burden of silence. As time passes, something else begins to weigh heavily: the burden of silence. When you disappear, the silence left behind is not just the absence of words. It's the absence of connection. In Stoicism, silence is a form of discipline. It's a conscious choice, a demonstration of control over our reactions and the power of words. But for those who don't follow this path, silence becomes unbearable. Silence carries a psychological weight. Those left behind begin to feel the impact of this lack of communication, and every moment without hearing from you becomes a constant reminder of what has been lost. They may try to ignore the void, but the silence grows louder with each passing day. Stoicism teaches that silence can be one of the most powerful forms of action. The absence of words often speaks louder than any speech. Can they handle the pressure? Curiosity about what you're doing, where you are, and why you disappeared begins to eat away at their thoughts. They start to wonder, is it too late? Silence creates a space that can only be filled by reflection, and that space becomes more and more uncomfortable. Your absence turns into a constant reminder that something important was lost. And what happens when the silence drags on? In Stoicism, we learn to embrace silence as an opportunity for introspection. But for those who depend on external validation, silence is unbearable. They begin to realize they have no control over you, and that the void left by your absence is something they cannot fill on their own. Silence is a powerful reminder that the control was always in your hands, not theirs. The big question is, what will they do now? The burden of silence continues to grow heavier. But you, firm in your Stoic position, know that this silence is your strength. It's not a void for you. It's a conscious choice. 8. Transformation through self-reflection. As time goes on, the absence becomes unbearable for those left behind. They begin to undergo a deep process of self-reflection. And here's the crucial point. Will this reflection lead to true transformation? In Stoicism, self-reflection is an essential principle. It allows us to learn from our failures and grow from them. But for many, reflection only happens when the impact of loss becomes unavoidable. At this moment, they begin to replay every interaction, every word spoken or unspoken. Regret grows, and with it, the need to understand where they went wrong. Stoicism teaches us not to dwell on the past, but to learn from it. Will those left behind be able to do that? Or will they remain trapped in a cycle of regret without taking action? The curiosity gap here is powerful. Are they ready to change? Self-reflection is only the first step. Stoicism teaches that wisdom comes only through action. It's not enough to reflect on mistakes. It's necessary to take steps to correct them. But many get stuck in regret, unable to move forward. They are aware of what they've lost, but the question remains: have they learned the lesson? This is the beauty of Stoicism. It teaches us to grow through pain, to embrace challenges as opportunities for self-knowledge. While they reflect, you move forward without regrets. Your absence is not only a catalyst for their reflection, but also for your own growth. What have you learned in this process? What has disappearing revealed about your own worth? Now the question is whether they will be able to act based on their reflection. True transformation only happens when there's a real change in behavior. Do they have that capacity? Or will they remain stuck in the cycle of regret and self-reflection without ever truly acting? 9. The final choice: to act or not to act. Stoicism teaches us that life is made up of choices, and in the end, this entire journey of disappearing, reflecting, and regretting culminates in one simple but powerful choice. Will they act or not? For those left behind, this is the hardest choice. After going through the process of realizing what they've lost, dealing with the void, and facing the fear of loss, it's now up to them to take action. But will they? Here's the dilemma. Stoicism reminds us not to expect anything from others. Their action does not define your worth. Even if they decide to act, it doesn't change the fact that you've already grown through this process. And if they don't act? Stoicism teaches us to accept what we cannot control. If they choose to do nothing, that is not your failure, but theirs. The final curiosity gap. What will they do? We've reached the turning point. Will they choose to try to win you back? Or will fear and regret consume them? Regardless of their choice, you, as a Stoic, remain unshakable. You've already made your choice to move forward, to grow, and to learn from the experience. Their choice doesn't change your path. And now the question that lingers: do they deserve a second chance? Stoicism teaches us not to hold grudges, but also not to submit ourselves to standards that no longer serve us. If they take action, it's up to you to decide whether they're ready to be part of your life again. And if they don't act, you already have your answer. Now that you understand the power of stepping away and the impact it can create, the real question is, Are you ready to take control of your presence? Sometimes, disappearing is the most powerful way to be noticed. It's not about manipulation. It's about respecting yourself enough not to be taken for granted. Remember, those who truly value you will miss you, learn from the experience, and grow. And those who don't simply don't deserve your return. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like the video and share it with someone who also needs to hear this. And of course, subscribe to the channel to keep receiving content like this, helping you reflect, evolve, and empower yourself with every choice you make. Let's go on this journey together. See you next time.